Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to This Week in Mythic Plus. This week's affixes are Fortified, Spiteful, Grievous, and of course, Thundering. It is also patch 10.0.7 today, which hopefully the servers are up nice and, sometime reasonable. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm recording this the night before, so I figured this video would have kind of two little components. First of all, just a real quick 1-minute TLDR of what is relevant for you, especially if you're like a Mythic Pluser, about patch 10.0.7. And the big answer here is not too much. Your talents may have changed a little bit, or quite a bit, especially if you're playing like Paladin. And so that's something to, look at. But other than that, there's just the Forbidden Reach zone, which has some rares and stuff in it. And it's good catch-up gear, good alt catch-up gear that you can find out of that zone. There's also this Onyx Amulet ring that you can get from the Forbidden Reach. Now, as of the time of recording this, it looks like it is a downgrade compared to Mythic item level rings for most specs. But Ian said that their goal was for it to be best for everybody to wear it, so I suspect this is an item that will see some tuning if that's not true, and so it's something to potentially go and start getting the primordial stones for it, which that's outdoor world content in the Forbidden Reach that you do to get that done, basically. Now, in terms of the Mythic Plus this week, other than that, I hope the affixes are still going to be Fortified, Spiteful, Grievous. They usually are. They haven't changed on these minor patches in a while, so hopefully that will hold. And yeah, it's a pretty good week, assuming that's true. The Spiteful Grievous combination it's not actually the affixes don't do too much synergistic stuff, right? Like Grievous is going to kind of slowly kill you. Spiteful's going to one-shot you. Fortified Grievous, I mean, there are certain nasty pulls that are made nastier by Grievous, but often the threat of this week, especially if you're not playing with too many melee DPS, is a little bit lower than some of the other weeks. If you have a lot of melee DPS in your group, then the Spiteful aspect of this week can alone be a huge problem. And of course, Fortified Trash in and of itself can be a big problem too. Also, Grievous Fortified, you sometimes get these nasty bosses where it's like, it's not tyrannical, but the Grievous ticking can still make it feel sort of like that. In my experience, that's been a little bit less true this season than usual, because this season, the Grievous, it's just sort of felt weaker relative to player healing than the usual season, but it's definitely something, second boss quarter stars bleeding out requires quite a bit more HPS than it does on your usual Fortified week, but it still does a lot less than on your usual Tyrannical week, right? So just burn through there, make sure you have Lust for the hard bosses. Lust for the hard bosses is really good this week because you'll shorten the fight. The fight will be so short that you can get through with big cooldowns for a much higher percent of the fight than on Tyrannical week, and you can kind of heal through those nasty, Grievous damage still. Other than that, there's not really too much to be aware of this week. The mobs that spawn Spiteful tends to be one of the least punishing on-death affixes compared to affixes like Sanguine or Bolstering that you can get that certain pulls become really unfeasible with, so it's not something that I would recommend worrying too much about or changing your route about too much. But as a general rule of thumb, of course, the same mobs that don't trigger that don't trigger Bolstering, Bursting, Sanguine also won't trigger Spiteful. So these are the little mobs like Hungry Lashers in Algathar Academy. Generally, any mob that you can mouse over and it says 1 in terms of how much count it gives, and in some cases even these Hungry Lashers that give 2 count. But for some reason, the Eagles here, those will spawn Spiteful Shades. But other than that, pretty much every other mob like these Eagles or the Lashers, the little things in Ruby Life Pools, the Scorchlings, the Whelps, the Thunderclouds, which don't even give any count. All of those mobs will not trigger the Spiteful affix, so you don't have to worry too much about them when you're planning your pathing through the dungeons. And then you just want to look at pulls. Anytime you're doing a pull where you're boxing yourself into a narrow area, if you're like, hey, we need to fight these mobs over here so we can dodge Thunderhead and not pull it, well, Spiteful could be a problem for you when it spawns there, potentially. So anytime you're doing some kind of narrow confines activity, that's where you need to be careful of Spiteful. Very strong things to make sure you have talented this week are roots, slows, knockbacks, those sorts of things. Effects like Ring of Peace, of course, huge. Binding Shot, even though it's nerfed, is still quite good against Spiteful as well. Those sorts of effects are really powerful, but just any sort of CC effects to help save your melee from Spiteful. Melee DPS just need to be playing with their head on a swivel this week. Make sure you have a weak aura. If you are a melee DPS in particular, you really do want something that just lets you know if you've got a Spiteful on you, and ideally on nameplates which Spiteful is chasing you, because that will make your life a lot easier. They do glow red if they're going to be chasing you rather than somebody else, so that can be something to look for as well if you'd rather not use a weak aura. But for most people, the weak aura is going to be an easier and more effective solution. So there is a non-weak aura solution for it, but which is looking for the red Spitefuls, but the weak aura is the best way to do it by far. Okay, that's our look at the affixes and stuff for this week. I will be making some content over the week about the Onyx Amulet and the 10.0.7. I mean, that's really the only thing about 10.0.7, so particularly once it either gets buffed or doesn't or whatever, and we know which stones are good and we start having some ideas about that, I will have videos on those over the next couple of days is my idea. But for now, it's going to be the video that I leave you with. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.